Hate makes for great content. Hey stars, I'm stellar and so are you, and I cannot believe I'm already making another video. I was a little worried that so many people saw my 2-hour one, because obviously I can't just make another 2-hour video out of nowhere, and I don't want people to have this expectation that I can consistently push out new videos. I am a university student with a job, albeit an extremely easy one, who doesn't really have free time lying around dedicated to content creation. The only reason I was able to make that 2-hour video is because I started the script in 2024 and picked it back up again during my summer break. But as of writing this, winter break is almost over, and I have nothing in my mind about what I want to create, is what I was thinking until a few days ago. See, I got the flu and felt like absolute garbage. But what they don't tell you about being sick is with all this free time, you're left alone with your thoughts. Creative thoughts at that. So suddenly, a video idea. No way! Hate is the best motivator, and I still have more to say about what I call my least favorite episode of Family Guy. Play it again, Brian. Okay, it's nowhere near being the absolute worst, but I still despise this one. Call the title clickbait, I don't care. So one of those days I was sick, I woke up and realized I have a lot of Family Guy DVDs. But what I further thought about was this. Does Play It Again, Brian have an audio commentary? So a quick look on my absolute favorite website, so much that it's the first result when I type F on all my keyboards, and I learned that Volume 7 has commentaries on all of the episodes. So okay, I'll watch this commentary while I'm eroding away physically and mentally. And let me tell you, I have never been so happy to have made that decision, because I truly think this commentary does warrant a whole video about one particular episode. Not only that, but it allows me to talk about outside material relating to the show. I love adult cartoons, but I also like watching other stuff, you guys. Get ready, everyone. There's no going back now. It's time for me to be insane about my favorite show once more. I'm going to really prove why Play It Again Brian is a failure on all levels. I'm honestly not quite sure how I should go about this. I've talked about how much I hate this episode in other videos, but this is a video that is focused entirely on the episode. You'll know exactly what this episode is about if you've seen either of my previous videos, but because this is an overall look at the episode, I'll run things by y'all again. Hopefully, this is the last time I'll ever have to do this on this channel.
Lois, my darling!
Brian wins an award for a writing contest, and Lois and Peter are having marital troubles due to Peter not being there for her as of late. But hey, what a coinky-dink! Brian's accepting the award in Martha's vineyard and invites the couple to come with him so they can get away and spend some time together. Peter acts like his same irritating self, like he was at home, so Lois and Brian spend the vacation together. On one of those nights, however, Brian tries to force Lois into sleeping with him, and she adamantly refuses. Peter finds out, fights with Brian, they make up, which then leads to Brian and Lois having a conversation. After that, they sing a song, and that's it, the end. Already, red flags should be flying in your head, as they do in mine. The obvious one being Brian tried to rape Lois. What's also notable is that the only apology, as if you could easily apologize about that sort of thing, is only given to Peter. Brian never says the word sorry to Lois. That's not even the bare minimum for this kind of situation. Then, there's nitpicks I have with this episode, which might not matter as much to those who aren't obsessed with Family Guy. The first point being, this story feels forced. Previous episodes joke about Brian's writing skills, episodes from this season laugh at Brian's character, but Lois doesn't do that to him here. The only time his character is called into question is when Peter mentions his dating history. During the story, Brian and Lois seem to get along perfectly when I think they realistically wouldn't here. Because of that, you can see exactly where the story is going. Why is Lois tolerating him? Because it is supposed to be believable that he can get with Lois, that we should root for a romantic relationship to work out. And that just sucks, doesn't it? I'd much rather it be up for interpretation, whether or not it's actually gonna happen. I think it'd make for a better story. To be fair, anything would be a better story than this, but hopefully you get what I mean. Maybe Brian doesn't have to be perfect for us to question if Lois wants to be with him. Maybe Lois could see the faults in his writing, but still appreciate the time he's spending with her. Wouldn't that be a much more compelling plot instead of him just being this perfect character suddenly? The The second point, something I didn't quite touch on in my other videos, is the inconsistent tone. So, okay, I took 2 randomly generated season 6 episodes and compared them with this episode. Trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. I looked at where the cutaways within these episodes fell and found this. I actually am super glad I randomly generated Moving Out and Long John Peter because I think it further proves my point. So Moving Out has 5 cutaway jokes, Long John Peter has 7, and Play It Again Brian has 8. On the surface, Moving Out looks similar to Play It Again Brian, but Play It Again Brian has 2 whole cutaways happen before Moving Out even gets to its first one. All of its cutaway gags, except 2, happen before As Time Goes By plays. For perspective, Long John Peter, which has 1 less, looks way more spaced out. You see the problem? This episode is cramming plenty of jokes into the beginning and end, either because they wanted that middle section, with all the Brian and Lois bonding you could ask for, to be taken seriously, or because it was poorly planned out. So sure, an issue like Brian attacking Lois does seem to be in a serious section, but what built up to that didn't feel like it was going to be as serious as it was. A friend having a crush on you isn't something that can be hand-waved, it's something that needs a conversation. You can't just write Brian to be more mature and have the show hold back on the cutaways, only for the serious issue at hand not to be handled in the proper way. I said in my last video that Family Guy can be taken seriously because it is unserious, but that's not what I mean here. 2 episodes that are serious and involve Brian's problems, Brian in Love and Brian Wallows and Peter Swallows, just show how this should be done. Brian in Love has a total of 9 cutaways, but specifically doesn't have any when Brian tries to see how she feels, and when they have an actual conversation about his feelings. They can still be funny, even packed with humor, but they don't shock you and then do nothing with it. Brian Wallows and Peter Swallows has a shockingly low number of 3, and doesn't have any of them happen after the 10-minute mark. Literally, the first half of the episode, which barely introduced Pearl, is what had the funny stuff happen. And there's only 3 of them at that. Play It Again Brian should be perfectly able to either keep all of the jokes, but take more time dealing with the issues and better pace the episode, or cut some of the jokes to have plenty of time to explore the plot. This episode's tone seems to be shock value, which isn't fun. Family Guy has the capability to handle complex issues. They have the capability to handle a situation similar to this. Why the hell are they ending the episode by expanding on a previous cutaway gag? The third issue was the visual stuff I noticed in this episode. So, Brian is an alcoholic, and we can see him drinking after the attack. He even has a glass of champagne, along with Lois, when they are watching Roman Holiday. However, we never see him drink from it, and his glass looks to be completely full. Doesn't even look or talk drunk, which he always does after drinking. Lois, on the other hand, is drinking all of the champagne given to her, so it's not like the animators forgot or anything. Since her glass is now empty, he offers her champagne, and she says her head is swimming. Now, what does this read to you as? Brian trying to get her drunk so he can take advantage of her? I agree. I almost feel like him drinking the morning after further proves he was trying something, because why would the animation not show him drinking then, but go out of their way to show him drinking afterwards? Lastly, there's the conversation the 2 share on the dock. I've gotten very heated over this scene, so I'll try to be calm here. As I said earlier, Brian does not say sorry to Lois for the way that he acted. This is meant to be an apology scene. The wiki even says he formally apologizes, but he never says the word. After all the nonsense Brian spews, Lois says she forgives him. Really? Even outside of him attacking her, we never really get to sit with how Lois feels about all this. All we get is her being in bed worried and this. I feel like we could have maybe, I don't know, explored how a situation like that would affect her. If this episode is trying to push the whole Lois's marriage being tested thing, you could even have her question if she made the right call. And like, that would be a stupid thing to write about because of all the implications, but at least it's giving her something. I guess, why should I believe her when she says she forgives him outside of needing a nice episode resolution? After the non-apology, Brian is then told that she's thought about sleeping with him, which goes against literally everything. Goes against her saying she'd never be with him, even if drunk. Wait a minute. It goes against her not sleeping with him when they were married, and it goes against her being higher than Laika saying he's not going to sleep with her. 3 whole times. But there's definitely more when Lois said no to Brian Griffin. He's then rewarded for his bad behavior by being told what her thoughts about him are like. See what I mean about the tone being off? There's a joke in the scene where Brian confesses, but it's after they have a respectful conversation. And hey, I don't really care much for that joke anyway. Here, there is no conversation, no apology, and then a joke about Brian being like a stuffed animal. Isolated from this episode's context, sure, the joke is funny. But in context, I don't even smile. It's not funny. Humor placed correctly works. This does not. Speaking of timing as an issue, this conversation is less than a minute long, and the main thing that is discussed is just how Lois kinda likes Brian. That's the absolute worst thing you could possibly fixate on. Once the conversation ends, there's a minute left of the show that goes to the goddamn spirit of Massachusetts. Feel like we could have changed how that timing worked out, show. But that's the basics to understanding the episode itself. And that's not the only thing this video was about. I think it's time to jump into that DVD commentary. Is what I would say if there wasn't a giant elephant in the room waiting to be addressed. This episode was based on something, and I had no idea until one of the first lines of the commentary.
Back when I was your age, a lot of motion pictures came from successful plays, and there was a play by Woody Allen called Play It Again, Sam. Netflix it. It's awesome.
And I call myself a Family Guy fan. Okay, to be fair, I knew exactly what the title was referring to. A line misquoted from Casablanca. I've seen Casablanca, and when I watched it, I didn't see the resemblance to this episode at all. I thought they only called the episode that because they played as time goes by. And granted, I knew that in the references section of this episode's wiki page, they say the title could be a nod to the Woody Allen film of the same name, but the phrasing there matters. They did not outright say that this episode was based on and featured many recreations of scenes from the movie. It's everyone else's fault, not mine. Also, why would I watch a Woody Allen thing? It's Woody Allen. Anyway, this little mistake of mine needs to be corrected. So I sat down, still with the flu by the way, and watched. So I guess an interesting fact about me is that this was the first ever Woody Allen film I watched, at the ripe old age of 21. Which, yeah, that is old for him. Well, okay, I remember my dad renting the movie Bananas when I was a kid, because the artwork looks super familiar to me. But I don't remember if I was actually in the room when it was playing, or if I was even paying attention. I certainly don't remember what it's about. Anyway, Play It Again, Sam is just meh. It is a movie that exists. But I do have a lot to say because of what it means for my beloved episode, so here's a summary. Alan Felix, a film critic, gets divorced from his wife, and his friends Dick and Linda Christie try to get him set up with someone. It's a whole lot of just trying to get him together with someone. Even Humphrey Bogart is there to give him dating advice. Throughout the movie, you can tell how close Alan and Linda are, especially because Dick is constantly busy with work and is really neglecting his wife. But they're totally just friends, you guys. Anyway, Dick's out of town, and Linda and Alan decide they're gonna hang at Alan's place. Alan then fantasizes about being with her. Quick interruption, but it makes me really sad to say that when I was taking notes for this movie, I wrote
Lois, my darling,
scene instead of mentioning Linda's name. I'm just gonna have Seth saying that line like that permanently ingrained into my brain.
darling.
Alan's freaking out about this because of the implication, and even has his own fantasy call him out on this. Still, Linda shows up, and the two of them chill at his place, talking about rape.
They say it's the secret desire of every woman.
I guess that depends on who's doing the raping.
Bogart then gets Alan to actually try and make a move on her before a vision of Alan's ex-wife just shoots him. Wait, is this movie good? Now, without the advice of Bogart, Alan decides to attack Linda in a similar way Brian did, and she leaves the apartment. Never mind, this movie sucks. Because he said that he thinks he loves her during the attack, though, Linda comes back in, kisses him, and they sleep together. With Woody Allen is crazy. Things are looking up for the two of them, except for, I don't know, the whole Dick being married to Linda thing. Even though he's passionate about work, he makes it clear to Alan that he can't live without her. Whoops! Before he can leave for Cleveland, both Linda and Alan go to the airport and tell each other that, yeah, they can't be together. The rest then becomes Casablanca, with Alan and Linda lying about what happened, and the couple leaves Cleveland while Alan stays in San Francisco. Okay, so I obviously don't want to spend a lot of time here because this video's focus is on Family Guy, but here's what's apparent. This movie thrives on Casablanca. Now, the plots still vary wildly, but the key aspect of a man getting with a married woman who ultimately decides he can't be with her is there. Alan, Linda, and Dick are not one-to-one copies of Rick, Ilsa, and Victor, but somewhat fill those roles. Alan sends them both away, Linda loves two people at once, and Dick is busy with his duties. I think this movie doesn't really struggle with tone, especially because this is a comedy, but it also does somewhat treat the whole cheating part seriously. So, needless to say, it's better than Play It Again, Brian. Not because Family Guy bad, but because there's an actual, albeit not fully original, story here. Similarities should have already popped up in your head, so let's go through them. Like Lois, Linda is being rejected by her husband while her friend comes in to give her attention. While Linda and Alan get close, they're on a beach together, sort of like how Brian and Lois spend their time together at Martha's Vineyard. The
Lois, my darling!
Scene in Family Guy is somewhat of a mashup between two of Alan's fantasies, the first fantasy having similar dialogue to what Brian says after the fact.
Hey, wait a minute, what the hell am I talking about here? This is Linda, Dick's wife.
Whoa, what am I doing? This is Lois, Peter's wife.
And the second having the actual phrasing used.
Linda, my darling.
Both scenes in a room have them drinking champagne and sitting on a couch together. They have the guy launch himself onto the woman, with something breaking in the process. I'm genuinely shocked the wiki didn't make the connection more clear. Play It Again, Sam is much more relevant to the episode than Casablanca ever was. But okay, why do I like what Play It Again Sam does more than what Family Guy does? I think the differences are the reason why. So, number one, Alan is an awkward man lacking confidence. He isn't able to score easily or even has the ability to walk up and talk to a girl. He needs a whole other person to strive towards becoming, especially in terms of scoring. Brian is nothing like this. While his confidence isn't impressive or anything, he has the ability to be smooth and randomly talks to women whenever he wants to. In this episode, he flirts with and sweet talks Lois more than he usually does anyway. The move Alan makes in this movie is not meant to be charming or clever. It's meant to be weird and awkward. It's notable, though, that this was him just going for it. His conscience personified as Bogart could no longer tell him what to do. Brian's isn't even smooth like he typically is. It's sudden and forceful. He doesn't do anything awkward, like tell Lois her eyes are like steaks, or lead up to this at all. Alan's awkwardness here can also be attributed to him drinking champagne, which is something he doesn't usually do. Brian doesn't even take a sip of champagne. If they were trying to suggest Brian wasn't drinking in the scene because Alan isn't a drinker, this is, quite literally, the worst possible scene they could have chosen. Even alcohol is a concern to Alan, who certainly doesn't want his fantasies to actually happen when Linda first walks through the door, and he tells her that maybe she should avoid it. Brian, while worried about his fantasies, goes right along and serves Lois champagne, not even worried about if it's what's best for her. Number 2. Linda's behavior is not like Lois's behavior. Like the conversation I brought up earlier, Linda acts a little strangely in this scene. She says things here that hint at potentially wanting Alan. Eye contact is the main giveaway here. She stares at Alan while asking if someone could love two people. She looks at him during the rape conversation, and she stares, like really stares, at Alan when mentioning that the alcohol made her feel light. Let's not forget, though, that she rejected him at first. Don't is said twice during the attack, but she kinda treats the attack like a normal thing. She brings up replacing the lamp she accidentally broke, as if what caused that to happen wasn't currently happening. No is what she is saying, verbally and physically, but she's not angry with Alan. She calmly leaves the apartment. Now, compare all of this with Lois. Lois and Brian have a lot of eye contact in this episode, but Lois never mentions anything that could imply wanting Brian. Her responses to what he says is that of someone who is flattered, not someone who wants something to happen. She is rarely the one who starts their conversations, and when she is the first to speak, it's either a simple compliment, arranging plans, or mentioning doing something for him. It's never suggestive, never flirtatious, never teasing. I personally consider this to be normal, friendly conversation. They make eye contact while talking, but you know what line doesn't have Lois look at him? The one right before the attack. I am not saying that Linda secretly wanted Alan to attack her or anything, but you see the difference, right? Non-verbally, there is communication that expresses intrigue. Lois isn't saying or doing anything like she would around Peter or anybody else she's considered being with. Nothing is giving away that she is waiting for a move to be made. Lois's dialogue during the attack is scary. It's not funny or ridiculous like what Linda says. Lois says no 4 times, stop it once, and get down and off twice. She doesn't seem embarrassed or sad about the situation, but afraid. She has to pry Brian off of her, unlike Linda, who is able to stand up and leave, and moves away from Brian much more than Linda did from Alan. Number 3, the aftermath. Of course, a big difference is whether or not the couple sleep together. Alan and Linda do, Brian and Lois do not. I don't want to change that, nor am I suggesting that's what has to be done for the episode to work for me. But Alan is much less selfish than Brian is after the attack goes down. I pointed out that I do think Brian was acting selflessly by hanging out with Lois, and it is a redeeming quality of the episode. But his conversations with Lois after the fact are pretty selfish. Not actually apologizing, asking for more information. Really, he's talking in a way that fuels his own ego. He's honest about stealing from a movie, but he's kinda just letting Lois talk without correcting her or stopping her. The attack itself is kinda made out to be something he did without even considering Lois. In the movie, Alan makes a move because he thinks Linda might actually want this. Brian's excuse for the attack is just not being able to take Lois being with Peter anymore. Alan is doing this for himself, but he's doing it because Linda might be waiting for something to happen. Lois is not waiting and isn't doing anything to indicate to Brian that he should try something. He's not thinking about her here, he's thinking entirely for himself. I think the only way you'd fix this is, again, for an actual conversation to occur on the dock. Not about how Lois has thought about this, but about why Brian did that, and an actual call out for him being selfish, whether or not Lois has thought about sleeping with him. For an episode based on a movie, I'm surprised how much they completely ruined the story. Like, why were small changes even made in the first place if you're just blatantly stealing from another IP? I'm not saying Family Guy can't make episodes based on other properties, because they can and have succeeded by doing that. But why in the hell would you make an episode based on a story where the whole point is being a better person after doing a messed up thing, if you're not going to do that messed up thing and instead doing even worse messed up thing without having the character become better because of it? And now, after all this context, after all these questions, can we talk about the DVD commentary? Oh, brother.
Hey, this is Play It Again, Brian.
I wish I was kidding when I said this is probably the worst DVD commentary I have ever had the displeasure of listening to. And okay, that might sound really harsh, but even the guys doing the commentary agree with me.
Well, we're definitely running out of steam here with commentary.
Not only is there not a lot to talk about at certain points, but there's complete silence for a while.
That's a good fight sequence by Mr. John Holmquist. Thank you.
They barely elaborate on certain things.
Did we try to keep that at all? What are you laughing at?
I'm laughing at us commenting on the sitcom convention.
And also laugh during the serious parts.
The only reason Lois is, as we say in the business, off model here is for when she says, "Get down, this is a good sweater."
Yeah, that's
So
right.
John had to draw a sweater on
He had
it.
to put a sweater on.
So he's upset now.
But the worst thing, in my opinion, is how they don't know what was originally written or what was actually in the show.
The first version of the script you wrote, they did sleep together.
I think what I wrote was they got into bed together and Brian had a premature ejaculation. There you are.
I could have sworn that they had sex.
Yeah, I think we
tried it to see what the reaction would be.
Yeah.
Now, we cut all of that out, so anybody who watches this who knows what Summer of 42 is, goes, well, that idiot he's ripping off Summer of 42.
They're all dead now.
Yeah.
I know, that's probably true.
I thought that was
sorry.
still in.
Is it still in there?
Doesn't he acknowledge that on
Oh,
the doc?
no, you might have.
Lois later, when they did sleep together in the first draft, we had to lose that when we changed.
When they weren't sleeping together. Yeah, because they did sleep
They
together.
did sleep
They did
together,
sleep
yes.
together. Yeah.
He did say that. Okay, so that's good.
So,
All right.
you know, anybody.
You win some, you lose some.
And the reason behind this makes perfect sense, especially if you haven't seen the DVD commentary and watched the movie before even seeing this episode. There were so many rewrites.
So we did a lot of rewrites.
The obvious main issue being what I brought up earlier. Does Brian sleep with Lois like Alan slept with Linda? The writer for this episode, Danny Smith, did actually want them to sleep with each other, and it could be inferred that Seth MacFarlane was on board, since Smith says that he wanted to do a version of it.
I think Seth had seen
Oh,
it. We
he
talked
talked
about it. He liked it. Wanted to do a version of Play It Again, Sam.
But other writers had their doubts.
If we followed that story, Brian would have sex with Lois.
Right.
A bone of contention for some of us.
No pun
especially
intended.
me.
A lot of the
Yes,
writers
that's
didn't
another
think
one.
that would be a good idea, that we'd be crossing a line.
David Goodman calls himself an executive producer for this commentary, but he has written for Family Guy before and is pretty much the only other person to provide a say on this. He brings up that he liked what Smith did, but also mentioned how the whole point of The Perfect Castaway is that Brian doesn't sleep with her. So I can't fully tell which writers were for and against this, but it seemed to be a big deal. That explains why the whole point of the movie was changed for this episode, but even more changes were made surrounding this. Slightly off topic, but I remember showing my friend the rough draft of my 2-hour video, and one of the questions he had was if Lois was actually admitting that she's thought about sleeping with Brian. It could be platonic, after all. I didn't really have a retort for this other than the next section of their combo discussing what these sexual thoughts are like, but what was said in the DVD commentary proves that I was right. Lois's line after having thought about being with him was written with the intention of being after they spend the night together.
In the original draft of the script, Brian later confesses after he sleeps with Lois, she says the reason that she slept with him is because she was so moved by the speech.
The joke about Brian being like a stuffed animal, also written for after it.
He kind of, in a friendly way, asks how it was for her, and she said it was kind of weird. She goes, with you, it was kind of like doing it with a stuffed animal.
These conversations were written with the express purpose of explaining why Lois cheated on Peter, and then she didn't. And they kept it in, for whatever reason. Is that part of the reason why the tone felt so inconsistent? I mean, it's literally parts from whatever draft near the beginning of the episode's production just added here because funny. And that's what really pisses me off. The reason this episode is the way it is, the reason why every strange decision is made in this episode is because of how jokes land. If Brian slept with Lois, you'd still have the writers bringing up what happened at The Perfect Castaway, but it probably still would have happened if everyone found it funnier.
Didn't get a very good reaction.
If it had gotten a bigger laugh, though. Don't you think if it had gotten a bigger laugh, it would have played?
If the goddamn creator of the show, who was still in the writer's room at this point, liked the idea of doing Play It Again Sam, they would have done Play It Again Sam. There is a non-zero chance that this episode went differently. So, because this episode was based on how funny things were, the script had to be changed. From what I can tell, multiple drafts and rewrites were made, because the writer of this episode has no idea what made it in or not. Did the first draft have Brian actually sleep with Lois, or did he finish too early? Did the Summer of 42 mention, the Are You a Pedophile line, and the lines about why Lois wanted to be with Brian get added in or not? This episode is held together with duct tape and glue, all on the basis of what makes the writers laugh. And that is just irritating. This commentary is so bad that even outside of it, in the commentary for The Former Life of Brian, McFarlane thinks that that was the commentary for Play It Again Brian. And I'd actually appreciate him being on here, because he knows how to run commentaries. His characters are heavily involved in this plot, even in the damn side plot, so why couldn't he do Play It Again Brian? Why couldn't Borstein do Play It Again Brian? Maybe this commentary would give me more material to work with, because I'd love to know what they have to say about this episode, or maybe even about Play It Again Sam. Never before have I seen a commentary this poor, whether it's because of the episode quality or not. Never in my life have I seen an episode's production be so messy, and on top of that, not stick the landing. What a goddamn mess. And even outside of looking at the making of this episode, I just don't understand. Why Play It Again Sam? What about this, at the time, 35-year-old movie, based on the 38-year-old play, spoke to them that they had to make this happen? As I mentioned earlier, the characters aren't really like the movie characters at all. Similarities exist, but the differences make this adaptation not work. And on top of that, you know what the main issue is? Well...
I'm not Bogart. I never will be Bogart.
Okay, the movie itself refers to this character as Bogart. Humphrey Bogart plays Rick Blaine in Casablanca, is clearly dressed up like Blaine, and since this whole movie is about Casablanca, I'm pretty sure this is just meant to be Bogart playing Blaine. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say is Brian is not like Blaine, even though the movie calls him Bogart. Brian and Bogart actually have a fair amount of similarities, like their heavy drinking and smoking, poor health, and attraction to barely legal women. This is about Blaine though. Everybody got that? Okay. People have often argued when Family Guy got bad. Look, I love Family Guy. and despite good episodes every now and then, yeah, it's gotten bad. I think the major consensus would be roughly around season 10, where you start to get episodes like Seahorse Seashell Party, Stewie is Enceinte, and Herpy the Love Sore. The commentary for Play It Again, Brian, and the next one joke about how Family Guy isn't as good anymore. They're surprised that there's people actually watching and buying the DVDs, and that only the first season is really good. My own parents stopped buying the DVDs once the show was canceled because season 4 was too violent for them. These are the people who didn't like the early seasons of South Park for a similar reason, by the way, so make of that what you will. While reading Brian Griffin's Guide to Booze, Broads, and the Lost Art of Being a Man, which was released around season 5's airing and season 6's writing, I noticed how un-Brian the writing felt. Well, how un-pre-cancellation Brian it felt. What I'm trying to say is nobody can agree on when the show went bad, but there was a noticeable decline from season 3 to season 6. Maybe not as drastic as one later on, but still. Like my parents brought up, sure, the writing between being cancelled and being brought back changed. Over time, the characters started to become different from their original molds, probably becoming more violent, hateful, and mean. I use probably here because I'm not quite sure where I fall on any of this, but I won't deny the shift because fans at the time noticed it. Where am I going with this? So I can make the argument that early pre-cancellation seasons Brian has a lot in common with Rick Blaine. And forgive me, but I need to talk about something that isn't Family Guy again. What is Rick Blaine's character in the movie Casablanca? For one thing, he doesn't really want trouble. He doesn't side with the Nazis or anything, but he also doesn't really do anything about them. Despite his neutral stance, it is noted that his cafe allows refugees, he ran guns to Ethiopia during the Second Italo-Ethiopian War, and fought with the Spanish Republic against the nationalists during the Spanish Civil War. He sort of refuses to give his past love tickets that can aid in escaping to Lisbon, but does change his mind once he's told why she didn't come with him to Casablanca. It could be because deep down, he still loves her, and it could also be because she did a genuinely kind thing to a man in need, especially because Laszlo is fighting for what's right. When a corrupt cop comes to arrest Laszlo, Rick makes it seem as though he's siding with them, but then pulls a gun on the cop in order to help Laszlo and Ilsa get on the plane. He's set up to be this passive sort of man who doesn't fully take action, but deep down is political. And hey, that's just about what Brian is like. In the first episode of the whole show, Brian says that he doesn't vote, and while he does try to stop Peter and put him on the right path, he also lets Peter do whatever he wants and can even encourage Peter's antics. His beliefs lean more to the left, and it's clear later on that he has beliefs like McFarlane, who is a supporter of the Democratic Party. I guess Brian politically is a Democrat, but he isn't super in your face about where he stands unless it's relevant to an actual episode's plot. Of course, as the show goes on, this becomes very much not the case. Episodes like Peter's Got Woods show Brian is very careful to appear as politically correct as possible, especially because of his upbringing featuring a racist father, as shown in Don't Make Me Over. He isn't your textbook racist, especially because he does seem to regret whenever he messes up, but he's not really trying to fix the problem, you know? He wants to appear woke without actually doing the work towards it. His work towards changing the high school's name to honor Martin Luther King Jr. is pretty much done only to impress Shauna, who is black. He doesn't even know how to have a normal conversation without being weird about her race. Although I'm jumping from season 4 to season 8, Quagmire notably points out that Brian doesn't do that much in terms of activism. He works down at the soup kitchen, Brian. We've never seen you down there. Very clearly, Brian is all talk and no action. And whenever he is political, it is always via his words. What Brian says occasionally are things I agree with, especially in an episode driven entirely by politics such as partial terms of endearment. But Brian is malleable when it comes to these things, as evident in Excellence in Broadcasting, an episode in which Brian becomes a Republican, being 2 episodes after partial terms of endearment. See what I'm getting at? Blaine is someone who isn't really vocal about what he believes in, yet has his actions show where he lies. Brian used to be more casual and helpful when he needs to be, but as time goes by, developed into this loudly outspoken figure who does nothing to help. The similarities he shares with Alan, who has things in common with Blaine, are why this episode was made. The whole idea being that one character is in love with the wife of someone he knows. However, so much is different between Brian and Alan and Brian and Blaine, and it didn't fully used to be like this. Early seasons Brian, the one from Brian in Love, would make an excellent Rick Blaine. Season 6 Brian does not. And this can really be blamed on the show's decline. Again, there's not a precise moment when the show got bad. It was gradual and is largely subjective based on who's making the call. What I will point out is that Brian changed so much because the writers decided to laugh at him and make him more unlikable. They base episodes on Brian being a writer, an alcoholic, or shallow with the woman he's with. Hey, those are criticisms Quagmire brought up. The writers decided to write Brian in a specific way so that they could then excuse what they did. At least they acknowledged the writing decline, right guys? They decided it would be funny to start laughing at him around seasons 3 and 4, especially in terms of the writing thing, and that's what he became, a punching bag who sometimes isn't the worst person you know. The post-cancellation seasons of Family Guy seem to have become the writers abandoning being serious and instead focus on what makes them laugh. If it's funny, it goes in. Consistency issues are still there, sure, but the era of Brian in Love and Brian Wallows and Peter Swallows is gone, and is now whatever this is. The writer's priority is to make the audience laugh. Look past the scene where Brian attacks Lois because she's wearing a good sweater. Look past Brian not properly apologizing to Lois and laugh at him being like a stuffed animal. Why should you care that Brian's no longer a good person? He still makes you laugh, doesn't he? Writing isn't the issue here, you are. It's just painful to realize that so many of the decisions being made for characterization are because of whatever is funny. It's something I pointed out about Lois in The Perfect Castaway, and now I know that it's something seen with Brian here. Just, man. Play It Again Brian has a rating of 7.2 out of 10 on IMDb. Looking at the statistics, more people like this episode than hate it, since 86% of the ratings are a 6 out of 10 or higher. This episode is placed 166th out of 446 entries and ranks higher than 63% of the other episodes. Needless to say, this episode is statistically a decent episode. So maybe I'm the problem. I am strangely fascinated with this episode. It's like a car crash. I just can't look away from it and all its flaws. How can I properly ignore it when it feeds into what I consider to be a super interesting aspect of the show? And yet, I think Family Guy would benefit from having this episode completely removed. I genuinely don't think the show needs this episode to exist. It isn't completely original, ruins what made the original stories work, had an inconsistent tone throughout it, was rewritten over and over and over again, was based entirely on whatever was the funniest thing to do, and it came at a time where the show was declining in quality. I have acknowledged that this horrible quality could be because the show was already losing steam, but I'd argue that maybe this is the indication of the show's dip. Play It Again Brian is a decently early instance in which we see a clear shift in how Brian is written, but as more episodes are produced, this is going to become even more early in terms of the entire show, and I could very well accept this episode as being the first nail in the Family Guy coffin. Nothing about it is good, in the context of the show, behind the scenes, or even characterization. But people like this episode. While I have argued my case siding with the minority opinion, I haven't really heard a perspective on why this episode is good or even great. That's why I want to encourage the following. People have left comments on my first video essay, either sharing their side of things, whether that's about the 2 women comment I made, or for why people like Quagmire more than Brian, or have mentioned feeling inspired or productive while watching. I want anyone who has a different opinion about this episode than I do to respond to this, whether that's in the comment section or by making your own video essay. I don't want people to take what I have to say at face value, and I'd also love to hear different opinions than my own, because realistically, I'm kind of alone in this. Feel free to debunk what I had to say about the visual clues in this episode, the adaptation of the stories, or even if you can think of a messier Family Guy episode production than this one. Even if you just think Play It Again Brian is funny, I'd like to hear about it. I'll try super hard to respond to anyone who does this, but if you are making a video, feel free to @me. If you are going to respond though, I only ask that you be respectful and not hateful. I started my last video as a way to challenge myself and think more creatively, and I started this one for a similar reason. I'd like to be more creative and analytical this year, and I encourage you guys to do the same. You guys have said a lot of interesting things in the comments, and I'd love to hear more. That's all I have to say though. Thanks for watching.